Today on episode 96, I'm chatting with Tom Gibson, who is a fellow middle school educator, and we're going to talk about an amazing way he builds classroom culture and creates a solid classroom management system using a classroom economy. I think I just said classroom 3 times. Anyway, there are obviously a ton of ways to get a classroom to run smoothly and to keep students engaged, but what if you could do it while teaching them about personal and fiscal responsibility? As a new teacher, can you imagine how awesome it would be if your classroom basically ran itself so that you could focus on small group and individual instruction? Tom describes just how he accomplishes this through a system he tweaked and innovated over the years and that he keeps on perfecting.
Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, where we help new and beginning teachers navigate through those crazy first years of teaching so you can maintain your sanity and personal life. Here's your host, Kim Lapre.
Welcome to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast, a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kim Lapre, and this is the podcast for new and beginning teachers who don't want to just survive those first few years, but actually thrive. I am so happy you're here with me today on this Monday, and I thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I mean, we're all back in school, and I know things are crazy. I'm easing back after an amazing break and have been really happy to see my students. And I'm especially excited this semester because I have my very first student teacher. Yay. Super excited, you guys. I'm also counting down to the new Educator Weekend North in Santa Clara, California from February 21st to the 23rd. So I think that's like about 6 weeks away. Now, this conference only happens twice a year in February and December, so you don't want to miss out on it, and especially because it's for new teachers such as yourself. So be sure to head over to teachersneedteachers.com/conference to sign up.
Hi, I'm Sam Fessich from the EduMagic podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
As I'd mentioned in the introduction, I had an awesome conversation with Tom Gibson, who is a middle school math teacher from Austin, Texas. Now, Tom wears a lot of hats in his school, but one aspect of his teaching that is really getting a lot of attention is his innovative way of running his classroom. His methods are part classroom management, part gamification, and even part life skills. So I'm really excited to have him share this with you so that you can start to think about how a classroom economy would work in your world. Thank you, Tom, so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Kim.
So can you tell us about your teaching experience and how you came to your current position?
Yes, I am currently a middle school math, robotics, and YouTube video production teacher. I'm in my 9th year of teaching. I did not expect to get into teaching. I actually studied sound recording technology. I wanted to get married the following summer. And so I'm like, well, I guess maybe I'll teach. I didn't really have a strong desire to do it, but I felt I could probably do it. And I remember one time in my electronics class, I wasn't very good at electronics. I think I had a B in the class, but he was going over this one system of solving a problem. And it was multiple steps and a lot of students were getting it. And for whatever reason, I was getting it. I was understanding it. It made so much sense to me. And I remember the professor just saying, like, explaining it over and over again. It was like, would anybody just like to try to explain it differently? And I got up there and I was like, well, I think about it like this. And then I just shared my process. And one of my friends was like, yeah, I had no idea what was going on until you got up and kind of like walked through, and it made so much more sense. And so it was like those little things that were kind of pointing to me to like, well, maybe I could do something in education. And so I started substitute teaching for a whole semester. And then I went through an alternative teaching certification program here in Texas. And then by fall of 2011, I had my first teaching position. It was fifth grade, really big Title I elementary school. There's about 1,000 kids at the school. And I did that for 3 years before moving to my current school in Austin, Texas. And I've been mostly spending my time in middle school since I've gotten here at Headwaters.
So why math out of all of that?
When I moved to Austin and I interviewed at the school, they were doing the math position was what was available. I always enjoyed math as a kid growing up. And then when I was teaching fifth grade, that was kind of like the piece that I latched onto, that I was kind of excited to come up with lessons. And I remember that's like the early years of the flipped classroom. And so I was like, I'm going to make some of these videos where students are either watching them at home or they're like kind of watching it in a station. And then I'm working in small groups over here. And that's where I found myself a lot more excited and getting way more ideas of how to teach it. Even though a lot of the content I had to go back and learn, I'm like, I don't remember how to add mixed fractions. Like I haven't done this since I was in like seventh grade. And so that's where I found myself. And then I just started getting excited about reading books on how to teach math better. And now that I've taught pre-algebra for so many years, it's really nice. I had a lot of freedom to develop my own curriculum here at the school that I'm at now. And so having that curriculum and every year just kind of tweaking here or trying some new project here and there, not having to kind of reinvent the wheel.
Now, you had mentioned along your journey that you would like tweak things and try out new things. So you and I had discussed that you came up with this whole classroom economy system, and I hadn't heard about it since you and I had connected. Could you let my listeners know what it is and how it works?
Yeah, I wanted to teach. This started all the way back in fifth grade. I wanted to teach my students about money, but I wasn't really sure how to do it. And I knew some teachers had kind of like little classroom bills here and there. And I remember reading a book by Rafe Esquith. I think it was either Teach Like Your Hair is on Fire or There Are No Shortcuts. He's got a few books. I can't remember which one it was. And he was talking about this way that he teaches his students about money, and he called it a classroom economy. And the kids applied for jobs. I already had jobs because that's pretty common in the elementary classroom, but the different jobs in the classroom had different salaries. And so students would get paid, and then they can use that money to pay rent on their desk. They could use that money for maybe a class store. They could use that money every month. They had an auctioneer, which was a class job, go and fundraise at different businesses and say, hey, my class is learning about money. We have an auction. Would you like to donate anything? And then at the end of the month, they've got 3 or 4 items, and they're auctioning those items off to their classmates who are using their classroom money to bid on it. They could use their money to pay for fines, which ends up being a huge classroom economy piece, or it's a huge classroom management piece where students are getting fined for any behaviors that aren't welcome in the classroom, whether it's just off-task behavior. In my class, it's like missing supplies. If they say something rude to another student, and the more severe the offense, the bigger the fine. So dishonesty in my class is going to be $850 fine, whereas missing your pencil or not having your computer charger or your headphones is a $50 fine. And so it's a pretty great classroom management piece. And I started it way back in 2014, just with students were writing checks, and I had these bankers, and I was like, all right, let me try to figure this out. And there were a couple resources online on how to do it, but most of it was paper-based. And the first couple years that I did it, I was just printing out money, and kids, if they wanted to use their money, they would have to fill out a withdrawal slip, and then they'd have to go to their banker. That was another class job, the person who's kind of keeping track of everybody's accounts. They'd have to go to their banker and get the cash out for something, and then go give it to the person that they're paying for something, or pay me because it's for a fine. And it was just this really time-consuming process. And I was like, I want to keep doing this because I think it's really valuable for them to kind of learn how to earn money and use money and save money. but it's taking so much time. And so over the course of years, I was trying to figure out how can I optimize this? And I started finding different websites where you could create like an artificial bank. You could give students a link, and then they would create their own account. And now they have this online checking account and this savings account, and then they can transfer money in between each other, or they can pay for things like they can pay for their fines digitally, like what everybody actually does now. Like I barely carry cash or use cash at all. And so it ended up becoming a fully digital classroom economy, which saved a ton of time. And then I was able to oversee everything that was going on. I could kind of see what was going, like what students were paying for, who had the most money, who was starting to go into debt. And so I could start talking to them. And they also, in addition to their salary, they could earn more money. We call it bonus money, where once a month they get a chance to document all the different ways they could earn bonus money. That might be getting 100 on a quiz or on a test. Let them get bonus money for extracurricular activities. Like, are you in after school sports? Okay, that's $50 of bonus money. Are you in jazz band? Do you have music lessons that you go to? And I try to make this as wide ranging as possible, so it's not just the kids that have hundreds on everything and they go to dance and they have horseback riding lessons and they have swimming. The kids that are doing a million things. I try to make as many different opportunities for kids to get that extra bonus money at the end of the month, especially for those who are going into debt. So it's like, okay, what can we do to get you out of debt? You're getting a lot of fines for off-task behavior. Maybe we can change the seating so you're not off-task. Have you gotten bonus money? What extracurriculars are you doing? Going through that and working like, okay, how can I increase my income and decrease what I'm spending my money on so I can get out of debt? So it's been a great opportunity for just those discussions around money, staying out of debt, saving for the things that you want, as well as that classroom management piece where I can just document students for you're off task. Let's go ahead and get back on task. And they know, oh, that means I'm getting a fine for that. And it kind of reinforces the behaviors that I want to see, as well as the behaviors puts some kind of consequence for the behaviors that I don't want to see in the classroom.
Now, I love this because in a previous episode, I was talking to a financial literacy teacher at the high school level, and we had discussed how kids just aren't getting trained on what to do with their money. And there are some classes, especially at the high school level, but with this type of economy, you can do this with any grade and really teach them about the idea of like earning money and having to spend it on expenses, not on just the fun stuff that they want, because they're so used to, parents paying for expenses. Mm-hmm. And you also have this wrapped up with classroom management. So I can see how this is like a really valuable tool, even if you don't teach math.
Yeah. I mean, I know of science teachers that are using it. It would work in at the elementary level, particularly since you're likely to have your students for most of the day, or you might have a couple groups of students. But yeah, it doesn't have to just be math. It's nice that in the math classroom, I can start bringing in those conversations about interest and things like that. But yeah, it definitely can be used in any content area. I designed a course for other educators to walk them through this. And it's actually a recently redesigned course. It's called How to Teach Kids About Money. And I made it with the teacher that's doing it for the first year in mind, because there's so many directions you can take a classroom economy and so many cool things you can do. I stripped it back to what's the bare essentials for that teacher that's doing this for the first time. And so it's 4 different modules. It's like the first module, I'm walking you through setting up the classroom economy, explaining what the classroom economy is. You're really developing your classroom management plan in this first module, and it's just under the umbrella of how it's going to work within the classroom economy. And then the second module walks teachers through those first couple of weeks. Or how do you introduce the system to the students? How do you hire students? How do you set up the bank and have all the students have their accounts? How do you begin to train the students in their jobs so they they know what to do? When do you start giving out fines if they don't have their money or their bank account in the beginning of the year? I walk you through all of that. And so I'm sharing all of my Google Docs. And so teachers can make a copy of the Google Doc and then modify it and adjust it however they want. I'm sharing the Google Forms that students fill out when they're applying for their class job. I'm walking through the Google spreadsheet of how I actually hire the students and work through that matrix and all that stuff. And that moves teachers to modules 3, which is the monthly routines. Like, what does fine day look like every week? What does bonus money day look like every month? And then module 4 concludes with the things that happen later in the year. Part of the investing side of this, which would be ideal for the middle school or the high school, and maybe even some elementary school, is students saving up enough money to buy their desk. Because if they buy their desk, they don't have to pay rent anymore. And so they start doing the calculations. If I don't have to pay rent for the last 6 months of the year, that's going to be $6,000 more that I can keep. And so I walk through how I set that up. That's like the stripped down version of like the essentials of like, if you want to get started with this, get things automated for you, from the students doing the class jobs to the automated emails that get sent when certain things happen, like buying the desk. And teachers, if they want to check it out, the first 3 lessons are going to be free, because I want teachers to be able to see what the resources look like, see what the videos are like, see if they kind of jive with the way that I'm presenting all of the information. So I've tried to set teachers up to be as successful as possible with this. And there's also a Facebook group the teacher would be a part of with other educators that are implementing classroom economies in their classroom. So that's what teachers would get as part of this course, where I'm walking you through how to teach kids about money.
Does this affect their grade at all?
I've thought about that. I've given not like small grades, like you filled out your application form and you filled out the bonus money form correctly, and that's a 100. I have contemplated doing like a you've stayed out of debt grade. That's like a real small portion of their actual grade in the class, where even if they go into debt, it's not going to significantly impact their grade. But just to have that number in there, I haven't gone through with it yet because I don't know exactly how I want to structure it, whether it's just like out of 20 points. And if you're not in debt, you have 20, or if you are in debt, you have 0. But I know if I was teaching maybe a class on a financial literacy class specifically, then I would definitely be looking for more opportunities to actually take grades for this.
It seems like it'd be hard to keep track of the infractions while you're actively teaching. So you had mentioned some online resources, but what is your system for keeping track of every misbehavior or every infraction without having to like stop the lesson to do that?
Yeah, I have a clipboard. I found that having a clipboard with I can write a student's name and then the date, and then I have like shorthand, like MW, missing work, O, off task behavior, with the date really quickly there. But what this usually, the way it looks and the way I explain it to students is, if I use your name in a redirection, that's my way that I'm communicating to you that you're going to get a fine. So if I said, please stay on task while you're working on your math, and that's just a general redirection for everybody, nobody's getting a fine for that. But if I said, Stephen, would you please stay on task while you are working on your math? That means, okay, Stephen knows that he's going to get a fine. And if I have my clipboard there, then I would write it right there. If I'm teaching a lot from the front and like going through like a lecture or something, that's going to be a little bit harder to actually stop and write it. But so much of my math classroom is more of students kind of collaborating and working together, which does give me a little bit, and that's also the opportunities that they get more chances to be off task as well. But it gives me a little bit more freedom if I'm just kind of walking around and helping students as they go. If I've got my clipboard with me, I can just jot something down. And then as students see me writing on there, it's like it kind of is a redirection for everybody. Like, oh, okay, someone's getting a fine. Let me get back on task.
Aside from like Class Dojo and your clipboard, what are some other maybe digital resources that can help keep track of like how much money they're making or how they pay fines? And I'm just trying to wrap my brain around how the money side of this works.
Yeah, I used several artificial banks throughout the years. The one that I've settled on for the last 2 years is called paygrade.io. I think the interface is probably the nicest of the ones that I've seen. I like that I can actually assign the job to the students inside of Paygrade. Like in Paygrade, I'll just you can say, these are all my jobs and these are the responsibilities of those jobs. And this is how much that job is going to get paid a month. And then you just start assigning it. Like, okay, this student is a banker and that student is an auctioneer. And so whenever they log in, not only are they seeing like their checking and their savings and all of that stuff, but they actually have their job responsibilities right there as well. There's this place that I can actually, it's called Student Actions. I can set up the fines. And so when they get the little ticket that my fine officer passes out and it says they were they had off-task behavior last week once. And so they go in, and there's a student action, and then they just click on off-task behavior, submit payment, and then it shows in the, just like a regular bank, you have your payment history. They have to raise their hand, show the fine officer, okay, look, it says payment for off-task behavior, $50, $75, whatever it was. And so that keeps track of it there. And that's also where like I set up the automatic payments. All that stuff goes in monthly, or I think it's only monthly that you can do. I set up automatic withdrawals for their rent on there. So I don't have to worry about it. It comes out, both the paycheck and the rent withdrawal happen on the first of every month. I actually have a video up on YouTube that just kind of walks teachers through the entire thing of like setting up Paygrade and everything like that. So if you just search my name in Paygrade or Paygrade overview, Thom Gibson, ThomGibson, and Paygrade, then it'll pop up right there.
Now, what if a student doesn't care about fines or the whole system in general if they have extreme behavior? Because I can see some of my listeners that teach in maybe Title I schools where they maybe don't seem to like this type of structure. How would you suggest that they deal with students that maybe at first aren't buying into it?
Yeah, there's going to be a couple students probably every semester that don't buy into it. And what I would say is I've talked to people that have that are doing this in a Title I school, and a lot of times this ends up being a way to, the whole money aspect of it can be an incentive for students that generally may be disengaged in your class, but there's this like competitive money, there's this auction, I want to buy these cool things to motivate some students. But you will have those students that are not motivated, and that's okay. You can't win them all the time. But with those students, the natural consequence of kind of like not being able to really participate in any of the fun stuff that's going on, whether it's the auction, or I know some teachers that do really big fun end of the year prizes, they will naturally miss out on those things. And that's okay, because that's just kind of the natural consequences of them deciding like they didn't really want to participate. Regarding the fact of students saying like, I don't want a class job. Can I just be homeless and not do anything? Homeless because they're they're not paying rent or anything, or they're going in debt. I tell students that everybody has to have a job, because I don't want this to be something where there are students that aren't contributing in some way to the class culture. Some students, it'll be a little bit more challenging to get them on board to actually do their job consistently, but that's where the buy-in at the beginning of the year, where they're at least applying for their top 3 jobs, comes in. There is like a job infraction fine if students are continually forgetting or not doing their job like the way that you've asked them to do it multiple times. They'll get a job infraction fine. But you will likely have several students every year that aren't bought in, and you're just going to do the best that you can and hope that the sting of not being able to participate does have some motivating effect on them.
For new teachers, I can see them feeling a little bit overwhelmed by the idea of setting this up and running it when they're still learning how to deliver lessons and write curriculum. So how will this actually benefit them in terms of how the classroom runs, and even from like a classroom management standpoint?
Yeah, I think the fact that you think through all the class jobs and how you're lightening your load of all the stuff that you typically do by having all of your students do it, and you're building positive culture in that, because all the students have a role, which is something that's going to have an impact on classroom management, and you are setting these clear expectations if you do this, you will have this consequence of this fine. And you're able to follow through with it. So it kind of sets up these systems in place. And the great thing about this is that like once you're a month, 2 months into school, like it becomes this self-running machine, this self-automated system where everyone knows what their responsibilities are. You're creating more work for yourself in the planning stages, because it does take some time to get this up and running and started. But then in the long game, you're saving time because you're having your students do this. You're implementing a classroom management policy that's very clear what the expectations are, and it's designed to help you, allow you to follow through in a way that has natural consequences, in a way that they're actually missing out on some of the fun and some of the joy of having classroom money and participating in something like a classroom auction or classroom prizes or a classroom store or something like that.
And I love that you took everything that you had to piecemeal together and test out and like try and fail or tweak, and the teachers get to benefit from all of the knowledge and from being able to do this successfully. And, especially as a new teacher, and you don't want to have to figure out everything on your own. They can just take this course, and it's just going to put them exactly where they need to be to have a solid classroom management system that's engaging for everyone in their classes. Yeah.
The engagement is present in like every teacher that has like tried it. Like, oh, the kids are so excited about their jobs, and they're so excited to do this and do that. And we had our first auction, and it was a lot of fun, and the engagement's there, and it's going to make you a better teacher. And I just want to share my experiences, as you said, of just trial and error.
Now, you have a podcast and a YouTube channel. So what kind of material do you share on both of those?
Yeah, the big push for all the content that I do is I'm trying to help teachers create meaningful and memorable experiences for their students. And so what that looks like on the YouTube channel is I'm doing classroom vlogs, I'm doing classroom reflections, sharing what I've learned, tips, classroom management, things that I'm learning from like business books and how I'm applying it to the classroom to create a more meaningful experience for my students. The podcast, I do a little bit more interviewing other people, what they are doing in the classroom that's innovative and meaningful and memorable, from talking to teachers about how they utilize mindfulness in the classroom, kind of what I was talking about earlier. Talked to several teachers about esports and the big surge of competitive video game playing that's hitting colleges and that's hitting high schools and some middle schools, and what does that look like and what does that mean, and all different types of topics like that. But the YouTube channel, teachers can just go to just search my name, Thom, Thom Gibson, Gibson, or youtube.com/GibsonEDU. The podcast is called Stories from the Classroom, and it's wherever you can find podcasts. And my Instagram is kind of just little snippets of what's going on in the classroom. And like today, I was putting some stories up of, since it's the beginning of the semester, I have students do job evaluations where they do a self-assessment, and they can basically ask if they think they deserve a pay raise or not. And so I was just shooting a couple Instagram stories of what that looks like, and posting pictures from my robotics classes and my YouTube class and my math class and things like that. Yeah, that's YouTube or Instagram.com/Gibson Education.
Now, if my listeners are interested in signing up for the course to learn about it, where can they find that?
Yeah, they can go to ThomGibson.com, ThomGibson.com/classroom economy, and it will take you to the landing page, and you can enroll. Enrolling is free. Those first 3 lessons are free. And then if you're like, okay, yeah, I'm on board for this, I want to deep dive into it, go through the rest of the modules, then they can go ahead and then enroll and sign up. And I also have a spot on the landing page for pitching your admin to pay for the course. course because there are professional development funds, and I include a ton of the talking points of what to bring up from especially if you are teaching math, different financial literacy standards that you are addressing with this, talking about how it serves as a classroom management tool, talking about it's going to make you an effective teacher and a more valuable asset to the school, which is going to improve the outcomes for your students, and it's going to allow you more time and energy to actually build those relationships with your students and teacher self-care, because you're not doing everything. Your students are doing a lot of the work, and then what to do if they say yes. And so I also wanted to give the people that are listening to this podcast a 20% discount code. Teachers need teachers, no spaces. It'll get you 20% off of the course.
And I'm going to put all the links to that in the show notes, guys, so that you can easily get a hold of Tom. Well, thank you, Tom, for being on the podcast. You've shared so much with us, and I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Kim.
You know, as I was talking to Tom about his classroom economy, I was thinking to myself, why didn't I think of something like this before? I mean, it's so practical and it's just genius. I honestly think that there's no better time than now to start experimenting with this. So here are my key takeaways. First, a classroom economy creates incentives for students to do what they should be doing to help take ownership of their classroom, to create autonomy for your students, and create a solid classroom management structure. The rules are simple yet effective in creating natural consequences for students. And isn't that really what we want? I love this because a student can learn from their mistakes via getting fined while also seeing the benefits of hard work by getting paid. Next, there are systems and technology to help keep track of the economy. And, once it's set up, it almost runs itself. He mentioned how he keeps track on a clipboard, and those fines make their way over to PayGrade, which is the online software that acts as the bank for students. I love how this automates so much of the classroom economy while also teaching students about personal finance. I mean, they have basically their own checking account that they monitor and learn how to spend wisely and save for what's important to them. Finally, if you're a new teacher, which pretty much all of you are, a classroom economy will help make your life easier. Yes, it does take some time to set up, but once you get the kids into the system, they're earning money, paying expenses, things like that, and you can just focus on the teaching aspect of your job. I've always struggled to find a meaningful way to utilize class jobs. And now that I know about the economy, I could really see how this would make even my life easier with all of the things that need to get done. Of course, now is a fabulous time to try this out. If you've had a rough first semester, then you can introduce it now, test it out, tweak it as needed, and then have a solid feel for it so that you can use it next school year in full force. So if you're feeling like you need to do something to get your class on track and to get your students behaving, and really love the idea of incentives that basically don't cost money, then you need to sign up for Tom's course. He walks you through it step by step so that you don't have to figure it out on your own and make the same mistakes he did when he was learning how to do it. And Tom was gracious enough to offer 20% off of the course for my listeners. So you definitely want to take him up on that. So head over to teachersneedteachers.com/economy to check out the course. And remember that he has the first few lessons for free so that you can see what you think about it ahead of time. And if you do decide that this is genius, which it is, and you want to try it out, which you should, then use the promo code TeachersNeedTeachers, all in one word, and grab that 20% discount. Well, I hope you found today's episode as useful as I did. And if you have any questions or just want to say hello as a listener, be sure to reach out at kim@teachersneedteachers.com. Thanks for hanging out with me today, you guys, and have an amazing week.
Thanks for listening to the Teachers Need Teachers podcast. Love this episode? Head over to Apple Podcast or Google Play to subscribe, rate, and leave a review.